So, the current administration has been very critical of Europe's role in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but yesterday it seemed like French President Emmanuel Macron had a quite different breakthrough in the international diplomacy department. Take a look.
We were at the Eiffel Tower having dinner with your wonderful wife and with my wonderful wife, and we didn't have an interpreter, and he was going on and on and on, and I was just nodding, yes, yes, yes. And he really sold me out, because I got back the next day and I read the papers. I said, that's not what we said. He's a smart customer, I will tell you that. That is the most beautiful language. I have no idea what he's saying, but that is the most... Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total default, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So to be clear,
Yeah.
we paid.
Yeah.
Okay, we paid. So is that the way to manage this? All mixed flattery in with your fact checks where your country stands on it?
The amount of flattery that this man needs is a psychological issue. I mean, Roman emperors didn't need this much ring kissing.
Yeah.
Everyone has to love him. The neediness. The man is almost 80 years old, and he's got the neediness of a toddler, number one. And one more point, now I'm done. I want to show you a tape of the governor of Maine and how she handled Trump. Watch this tape.
Is Maine here, the governor of Maine?
Not here.
Are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Diplomacy, and Macron's actually one of the few heads of state who was actually in office when Trump was in the first term. Him, Netanyahu, and only a handful of others, because people have termed out and moved on. And they've always had a decent working relationship. But I'm very struck by something that happened in the past 24 hours, which is the UN held a vote in recognition of the 3-year anniversary of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. And what countries voted against recognizing this? Russia, North Korea, Belarus, and the United States.
Iran.
And I never in my lifetime thought that we would see this, where we were siding the United States on the UN floor with Russia in its war of aggression against Ukraine. Now, I'll say this. In the first Trump term, I supported, believed in, and think it was effective what he did when he encouraged European allies to contribute more to defense spending. Burden sharing matters. They needed to pay their fair share in NATO, and it's made the alliance stronger. But what he is doing now is essentially saying America first means America alone. It seems like he's basically saying we are going to retreat from this effort and leave it all up to the Europeans to help the security of Ukraine. And that is just... It's wrong, A, because we have a vested interest. Ukraine's been fighting our enemy, Russia, with resources that, by the way, we're not just giving them money. Those are things that we manufacture here that are contributing to our economy. And they're also taking on... I'm sorry. I'm not feeling great today, and I keep losing my train of thought, so let me just say this. Well, it's incredibly important that I think we, in this moment, America first should not mean America alone. People who stood by our side, we need to stand by their side.
Well, you mentioned Macron and how he spoke to the fact that Europe knows it needs to get involved more. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this pivot is because Donald Trump always called for that, or they now realize they can't rely on the United States. And I think the other thing that maybe Donald Trump needs to realize is when you depend on and I'm going to oversimplify this, the bad guy, they're there for themselves. Mm-hmm. Allies and friends are not. They actually stick with you in the tough times. So there's a transactional thing happening right here. I can't quite predict why Donald Trump is siding with Russia specifically right now, because usually
What's your guess?
I honestly don't know, because I know he wants things from Ukraine. Russia, I've always seen in admiration. I think he thinks like Putin. He thinks he can have Greenland. He thinks he can have Canada. He thinks that land grabbing is something that we're allowed to do, while Putin just wants to restore the USSR. Like, I don't know. But I would recommend that Donald Trump don't go to dinners without interpreters, because you don't sit there with a foreign language and nod to everything. Like,
Well, yeah. And why does he keep touching him? What's with the hand on the knee? You notice Macron was like, get away from me.
To your point, Sarah, I think most presidents don't sit in a room with the leader of an ally without an interpreter, especially if they don't understand the language. I think this president, unfortunately, perhaps either doesn't understand geopolitics and doesn't understand the importance of having allies and the importance of our allyship, or perhaps there is a reason why, to your point, Joy, that he is so enthralled with Russia. I don't know if it's because he thinks by getting Russia closer to the United States that perhaps they'll ice out China. I think that is a ridiculous reading of the political landscape.
He can't figure that out.
Or exactly.
Not
Or again, he just doesn't understand geopolitics in the way that a president should. But we kind of knew that before,
What does
right?
he owe Putin? Maybe he owes something to Putin.
Well, I just think back to many of our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers who fought these wars to make sure that we were not chummy and didn't chum up. And, as we're disappearing American history, what else are we disappearing? Are we forgetting who these guys are? And it is all transactional. It is all transactional.
When you and I were younger and we were kids, Nikita Khrushchev, who was the head of Russia at the time, the USSR, he said, "We will destroy you from within." And here we are, like 50 years later or whatever it is, and that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing.
Well,
Trying to do.
That's what they're trying to do. That's what they're trying to do.